Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another week of Off the Track, episode number 34. And it seems like every single week that we shoot an episode, we are getting just that much closer to the heart of race season. Welcome back to the show. My name is Tanner Holmes, your host. And with me today, my co-host, best buddy, Bennett Gooch. Bennett, how have you been?
Pretty good. I'm super excited for this episode today. We got a lot to talk about Red Bluff last weekend and how you did there. And also our guest that's going to be coming on, four-time NHRA champion, Steve Torrence, who's also a big advocate to live the Western way of life. And he likes to rope, and you don't see a lot of racers that kind of do the country stuff like that too much anymore. But I'm really excited for today's episode.
Yeah, and I got to give you a lot of credit. I mean, you were pretty much the main reason that we were able to get Steve on. I'm not going to lie, no disrespect, but I'm not really into the drag racing or even following that scene. You know, I know like very, very little about it. And so Bennett had brought up who Steve was, kind of, we started talking about it. I was like, oh, that would be, that'd be really cool. And then we're able to get him in today's show, like Bennett mentioned, learn about his lifestyle, what it's like to literally be at the top form of drag racing and winning, a four-time champion, pretty much seems like done just about everything there was to do. So this ended up being a pretty exciting interview where I was able to learn a lot about just another form of racing, the sport, how it's similar to kind of what we do, how it's different, but just, what it is like to literally, that is their life.
Yeah, last weekend at Pomona, sadly, I believe Steve got taken out in the semi round, so he did not beat who he was supposed to be. I think he raced Ashley and didn't beat her, so he didn't make it. But last weekend on your end, not too bad. You had two races back at Red Bluff, and night number one kind of went pretty good. You ended up winning that. You want to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, it ended up being a pretty successful first night. Friday, things weren't off to a very hot start. We ended up qualifying like 22nd. I don't know. I just kind of dropped the ball in qualifying. And, the racetrack was really kind of rough to start, really chunky. And then it got better as the night went on. But basically, long story short, we got through our heat race, went 5th to 2nd in our heat after having a stacked one. We had all three orange carts in there. I think you could throw Tyler Seavey in the mix. Maybe Angelo Cornett was in there as well. So we had like 5 or 6 really fast cars. Was able to advance 3 spots. And then in the A main event, I don't know if it was just one of those nights for us, but like we were lights out. I felt like there was no one that could really touch us besides maybe once Landon got into second. He had a shot, but just the car was good. No matter if I ran the top, which was not the preferred lane, or if I ran the bottom, which was the preferred lane, didn't really matter. We were passing cars. And then on Saturday, what a pretty disappointing end to Saturday, but it was still a good points night. I mean, you guys will, you saw in the video, Bennett, you were there. It was just a wild weekend, and it didn't help that the track conditions weren't they just weren't the greatest, and that combined with, quite a few yellows and some incidents. And then, it came down to pretty much the last restart where ultimately, as frustrating as was I lost, and, I kind of got a bomb thrown on me. I think I could have played my cards better. And it just was one of those times where I kind of made one little mistake behind the wheel and, left the door open. And when you leave the door open for guys that can be desperate, things happen. And that's what happened. And we didn't end up winning the show.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway that I took away from the A-main event on Saturday night was if you're going to restart 5th, don't do it 4 times in a row. And I think I was watching, and I was like, okay, well, he's going to start 5th. He'll be good here. Then another caution, 5th. Another caution, 5th. And I think you were even like trading sliders with Colby Copeland for a bit to try to get up in 4th. And then I don't know if you just couldn't catch a break there, but like I said, it's just kind of a weekend of what could have been.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just there was a lot of frustration there. Like Bennett said, I think literally 4 restarts in a row. The whole top 4 didn't change, and a lot of it was just guys in the back. I don't know if they just couldn't get laps going, but also, like I said, the track played a huge factor. Everyone's more fighting for one lane, which was the top, where it really started to get like very heavy rubber. And then with that, and when there's rubber up top, it's obviously not as good to restart on the bottom. And for some reason on Saturday, and this happens, sometimes it's hit or miss, but when it rubbers up, our stuff's really good, and our stuff was, but I definitely wasn't a dominant car, but I also never got like a great shot till, maybe over halfway into the race to really show if my car was any good, because there's just so many yellows. So by the time, guys started building laps at all, we were always in traffic or stuck behind other cars, which when you're not able to run your line properly because of other people in front of you or you're racing, it's really hard, especially if your car isn't absolutely perfect, because you get really tight. It's easy to bike. It's easy to, just to get out of that one lane, which is very, very, it's not hard to hit, but it was just a disaster. And like I said, a lot of yellows played a factor into me, restarting in one of the worst spots, which was, the third row inside. Because at least if you restart in third, if the leader or the second place car on the inside, because the leader usually chooses the top, gets a good start, you can make something happen. But for me, like, I was already in sixth by the flag stand, and then I was just trying to fight to keep my nose in the fight for if something happened. And then sure enough, we saw the chaos into one once I got into the third or fourth there. And then all of a sudden, everything was sitting in my lap and I just didn't execute. So, I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm not going to lie. It's been like, it's one of those things you don't forget. You can win. I think you could probably be Kyle Larson and win 45, 50 races a year, and you have one race like that that's a little bit of a premier event, and let it slip away, and it doesn't matter how many races you win. So it's tough. You just try to put your best foot forward every single week, and we'll put that behind us. And I always like to say, and I'm sure Bennett, you can agree, you learn your most from your losses. Sometimes you learn from your wins, obviously, but the losses that sting are really what teach you.
Right, I would have to agree. I think that's what you said there. I would say every loss I've had, I took away the key parts that would help me learn. But with that said, you got points race number 10 coming up, another huge 2,100 to win open race, which is the Vern Wheeler Memorial. So keep your head up and look forward to that race next weekend.
Yeah, we are super excited to get back. That's one of the more premier events at Red Bluff we have not got the chance to win, so there's no better way we could possibly bounce back than chase that. And 3 races left. I'll say we're definitely now officially in the fourth quarter of the Red Bluff Outlaws season, and we're 9 points back from the lead in the open points standing. So a championship is in sight. We're going to have 3 perfect weekends, but we are absolutely looking forward to it. With that little recap on our weekend, it is now time to talk to Steve Torrence, just an absolute badass in drag racing. So if you don't know much about him, this will be a great opportunity to hear about what Steve Torrence does.
All right, so today we are joined by the 4-time NHRA Top Fuel champion, Steve Torrence. Steve, thanks for joining us today on the show.
Thank you guys very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I actually got the opportunity to meet and talk to Billy back in July of 2019 in Sonoma, and Billy ended up actually winning that weekend. And I think a huge thing in motorsports is we always talk about the initial time you meet a driver. For the first amount of time that they give you is what makes a fan for life. And that's kind of when I, noticed the Torrence racing team and became a fan of you and your dad when you guys go and race.
You only get one opportunity to make a first impression. A lot of people base that off of what they see on television or what they see on you in the heat of a moment, and then never leave an opportunity to actually speak to people and talk to them at the ropes or, in the winter circle or wherever it's at. And so, I'm glad that you guys got the opportunity, and it's basically like talking to me if you're talking to my dad. I mean, I have so many people that come up and say, man, I just talked to your brother. And instead of saying, no, that's my dad, I just go along with it and say, yes, sir. How was he? So yeah, pretty unique opportunity.
I'd have to agree with that. You guys are definitely class acts. And to get really started in this interview, for the fans listening at home, because we are mainly dirt racers. Tanner races a 410 sprint car, I race a dwarf car, and our fans are dirt racers. But for all the fans that might not know too much about Top Fuel, do you want to go ahead and explain a little bit about what you do and how you got started?
Yeah, so, man, been around drag racing my whole life. My dad raced sports and stuff when I was a kid, and I mean, even going all the way back to street cars on the Friday night bracket race weekend, and so just naturally, as most kids, you kind of want to do what your dad's doing or what your parents are doing. So I spent a lot of time in and growing up at the racetrack, going to super comp, super gas races, and then so that was the progression. And then I had an opportunity to race a car with my dad and race super comp with him, and did so until 98, 99 would have been my first season when I was 15. And I raced all the way up until like 04. I had cancer in my senior year of high school, so I missed a little bit of racing there. But in 04, I had a just coincidental meeting in the staging lanes with Don Perdome, and he kind of set me on a path of, if I wanted to be a professional race car driver, to try to go race an alcohol car and see if I can drive one of those. And so that set the wheels in motion and got the ball rolling. And my parents sent me to Frank Hawley's school, and I got my top alcohol dragster license and had a chance to drive a car for Tom Conway and Dr. Howard from Oklahoma for the accident of his wife. And so that was 2005, and I went out and won the championship the first season. And then the following year, had partnered up with Evan Knoll from Torco Racing Fuels and had a chance to go drive a top fuel car, and did that off and on up until I think 2009, 2010 would have been my first full-time season driving for Dexter Tuttle. And then in 11, we campaigned partial season and then decided to start our own race team. And so we started Torrence Racing, which is our family race team, and campaigned full-time schedule from 2012 until now. And so what I do is a 300-inch, 25-foot wheelbase car that weighs 2,330 or 2,340 pounds, has 11,000 horsepower, and goes 0 to 100 in less than a second.
That's crazy.
And we'll run we don't run a quarter of a mile. We run 1,000 foot, which is 320 feet shorter, in 3.6 seconds at over 330 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, that's absolutely insane.
That is nuts. Like Bennett was saying, we do not come from really the drag racing background, so hearing all that is absolutely incredible. The question I had was, you talked about when you first started, the first time you were in a car, back right before 2000, 98, 99. Did you just know the first couple times getting in the race car and feeling the horsepower? Because I feel like as a driver, you kind of almost have that moment where it's just, you're hooked. Was that how it was for you? Your first time really getting to feel power in drag racing?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, you guys know it as well. When you get in something and it's just, it blows your mind. It's something that you're so excited about, but it kind of exceeds your expectations and gives you that adrenaline rush that you can't describe. You can only experience. It's that sense of out of your comfort zone, makes you a little nervous, makes you a little apprehensive, but makes you want to do it again. And the first time I got in any kind of race car, I had that feeling. When I was a kid, I competed competitively in martial arts all over the United States. I raced motocross growing up and had a little bit of success in that. And so you're a competitor your whole life, or by nature. I think that it's I don't know if it's something that you obtain or you learn, or it's just in you to want to compete. But it was all of those feelings coming together, getting in a drag racing car the first time ever. I mean, the first car I ever drove was a 170 mile an hour super comp car. I mean, so I'm driving faster than most people ever have by the time I'm 15. And so it really gave me a step up to get where I'm at now. And so I think that, just like what you guys do and what I do, the more you go, the faster you go, the faster you want to go, the more you want to do. And so it keeps building and compounding.
So you mentioned that you had a brief career in dirt bike racing there. Was there any other opportunity to drive another race car other than a dragster?
No, and it's, maybe something could have presented itself, but I never really pursued it, and I never really have went outside of drag racing much. A couple years ago, Antron Brown and myself went and raced the Mint 400.
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
And had an absolute blast in that. We were in, I don't remember the class, but it was a Polaris side by side. With, when I say that, you think of something you can go by, but these things were so tricked out.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Probably 20 inches of shock travel. I mean, it was like riding a dirt bike with 4 seats on it.
So, well, to mention that, you mentioned the Mint 400. That's a big off-road race, and I am a huge fan of the Baja 1000, and that's definitely a big step up from that. Would you ever consider yourself maybe going to race the Baja at least once in your life?
Oh, I would love it. Absolutely. That opened my eyes to something that really I was pretty comfortable in. I mean, Antron and myself both were motocross guys when we were younger. So you have the ability to read terrain, know what you have coming at you. And a dirt bike is way, way different than a four-wheeled vehicle or anything, but you definitely have to read the ground, read the terrain in front of you as it's approaching and make decisions. And then having the sense and the ability to drive by the seat of your pants. I mean, that's something that people don't think about when you're talking about a drag racing car. It's just going to drive down a straight track on a flat surface and have to read it. But it couldn't be further from the truth, because when you have 11,000 horsepower trying to push you to the limits that what we do, you have to feel whether that car is tracking, whether it's pushing. When the car's 25 foot long, you're feeling inputs from the vehicle that really are not affecting it, but you're feeling it because the car will bow left to right in the middle of the run. So you may be 2 inches to the left and the front wheels are 2 inches to the right, and you're still going straight.
That's crazy. What surprises me is when you launch that car at 11,000 horsepower and you say you're going 0 to 100 in less than a second. Can you describe that initial impact or how your body feels and reacts to that? Because I know if I ever get the opportunity, I'd love to at least be in one. And I always think, they make a 2-seater sprint car, and I think for someone that's never raced one, that might be their best opportunity to ever feel one. I don't know if they have that for NHRA or whatnot, but I would love the opportunity just to get that feeling of launching one of those cars. Could you describe that initial impact on your body?
They actually, Larry Dixon does have a 2-seater dragster, and I think he's given some people some rides in it. Initially, when we hit the gas, we'll go 0 to 60 feet in 0.8 seconds, and we'll be traveling over 100 miles an hour at that point. The only thing that I could equate it to is maybe sitting at a red light and getting rear-ended by an 18-wheeler that was running 70.
That's crazy.
It's as soon as I hit the gas, it's 3.3 Gs. 2 seconds into the run, about 300 feet into the run, it's almost 6 Gs. So the thing is pulling harder 2 seconds into the run than it is as soon as we hit the throttle, because you're able to apply the clutch and you have some momentum and you can and put more horsepower to the ground. But it truly is the most violent, hardest hitting acceleration that I've ever experienced through anything. We accelerate quicker than a fighter jet taking off of an aircraft carrier.
Yeah,
so it's pushing you so hard. The thing that's most difficult to explain to anybody is just the sheer acceleration and how fast it's moving. I tell people all the time, you get in your vehicle and you're going down the road and you say, okay, I'm going down the interstate, and you see something coming up and you're used to traveling at 70 miles an hour. Well, you can pick a point, you can let off the gas, or you can do whatever you got to do within 10 feet, either direction of the point you pick. When you're in a top fuel car and you're accelerating over 400 feet per second, and you pick that point and you drive to the finish line, you may that's the finish line before you let off the gas, simply because your mind and your foot is not in conjunction with the speed that you're traveling.
That's just absolutely insane. And I know you mentioned the feeling, going 300 miles an hour with that speed and that initial impact on your body that you feel 2 seconds into the run always becomes, what you dread the most, and that's wrecking. And I know I just want to ask you real quick about your Dallas wreck in 2017. Tanner's wrecked pretty big in a sprint car.
I have.
And I've seen, I-70, right?
Yes.
I-70, you're easily going over 130.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty hard hit. Can you describe what it's like to feel that impact in a top fuel car doing 300 into the wall?
So I hit the wall that day going 327 when I hit the wall. And what happened was the tire blew out. The left rear tire ruptured and disintegrated. I felt the car drop. And Tanner can tell you, and as well, when you have a wreck, everything is going so much slower.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
And you feel every bit of it. And I felt the car drop. I felt the car start turning left, so I turned into the skid. And then the next thing I know, I can tell you, I didn't really feel the impact. I just knew it happened, and I'm pointing toward the opposite wall. And I'm thinking, I got to get this thing. I just hit the wall. I've got to get this thing off the other wall before I hit it. And so I'm trying to grab the steering wheel, and I can't find it. And I'm watching in front of me, and I'm grabbing for the wheel, and I'm grabbing for the wheel. And I finally take my eye off the wall and look down, and there's no wheel. It's gone. But the shaft is there. So I grab the shaft, and I turn it as hard as I can. Well, nothing happens, and it moves super free. And this is all probably happening within a second or two.
Right.
Then I look at in front of me again, and I realize the whole front of the car is gone. The car broke off right in front of my feet. And so I'm just basically sliding and grinding towards the wall with my feet sticking out in front and one rear tire and the engine behind me that is blown up. And I grab the brake and slide to a stop up against the right wall and check on everything, make sure that everything that's supposed to be attached to me is attached to me, and undo my seatbelt and get out. And at that point, you're just running on sheer adrenaline. But it happened so quickly, but it took so long to happen. And it's not a matter, people ask you, that's one of the first questions you get asked by someone that may not be that much of a fan or just learns that you drive a race car is, well, have you had any bad wrecks? And so
yeah,
up until that point, it wasn't a matter of if, it was just when. And I said, I would always answer with no, not yet. And so I had a wreck that was completely out of my control. Nothing I could have done would have stopped that from happening. And so it was difficult to overcome because we were right in the middle of a championship chase. I mean, as much as you want to say it doesn't mentally affect you, it does. It would be easier to get into a sport that you didn't count on your reaction time so much for winning and losing, and that the actual race lasted longer. So, say if you were sprint car racing or off-road racing or whatever, if you can get back into a car or a truck or whatever and race, it gives you a little bit more time to get comfortable in the car again and get acclimated with things. But our runs are hours of preparation for 3.5 seconds and won and lost on reaction time. So I struggled for the next couple of races that year, not really overcoming a fear, but just getting that back in the back of your mind. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you've never fallen and scraped your knee or whatever on a bike, you or never had a bad wreck, you don't think about that. But once that happens, you're like, oh damn, that kind of hurt a little bit. Maybe I want to be a little more apprehensive about it. And so it was something that was bound to happen, and something that I'm glad did happen because it makes you a better driver.
Yep.
It make you know what the risks are, and you still deal with them and just move on.
Absolutely. I really liked what you said there. I always tell people that, we just literally, it's like when we show up to the track, we know what we're signing up for, when in situations like a wreck's going to happen, part failures are going to happen. We're going to make mistakes as drivers. It's just how the sport is set up. In talking about that wreck, I would consider, obviously a wreck, a setback or a moment that, is obviously not a great thing. Throughout your career, you had a couple of those. You mentioned, much earlier in your career, you had cancer, at one point heart attack. You have wrecks that happen. How do you overcome those and continue pushing forward? Because, even these drivers at the highest levels of racing, it's still so difficult to continue moving forward. Because just no matter what, just mentally the tolls that those can take on you, and to continue pushing forward and then ultimately getting to where you want to be, the success, the championships, it can really be a much longer and tough road than anybody sees from just, sitting in the grandstands and from far away.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's mental fortitude, and as competitors and as racers yourself, that's an associated risk. That's something you're going to deal with and take it, just like you get in your vehicle and go up and down the road. I mean, there's more likelihood that you're going to get hurt doing that than you are in the race car, because any race car that any of us get in, we've got on a fireproof suit, we've got on a helmet, we've got on 5 to 7 point safety harnesses with arm restraints, and everybody that we know that we're racing against is sober and driving in the same direction for the most part, and qualified to do it. They don't have a cell phone, they're not texting, and there's so many other distractions that we're not dealing with, but it is just part of it. And when you look at it that way, you're able to kind of compartmentalize it and say, hey, this is a risk I'm taking, but this is what I love to do. I mean, it's like jumping out of an airplane. I think that's the most terrible idea ever, but somebody likes to do it.
That's absolutely true. So Tanner actually has a sister who races competitively with him in the same division, and we always talk about a sibling rivalry, and I'm actually really pumped to ask you about this. This is your dad that you go up against in some elimination rounds. What's your thought processes when you're pulling up to the line and it's going against your dad?
Oh man, I mean, it's no different than you pulling up and racing your sister or whatever. It's the ultimate pressure because, and you know it by being a family member. It's the situation where that person right there has the right and the ability and the bond to talk so much trash to you that no one else can. And so I work with my dad every day. We work together at Capco. And so if we go out there and race and he beats me, he's going to talk a little bit of crap. But all the guys here at the office are gonna do the rest of it for him. How come you let the old man beat you? How come, like, hell, he don't even race but part time and he comes and kicks your butt? And I mean, so it's fun. I enjoy it. My dad's 25 years older than I am. So in some kind of ways, we grew up together. I raced motocross with my dad when I was a kid. We've done everything together, whether it's fishing or racing or whatever it might be. That competitive nature and competition is there for me to beat him and him to beat me. And it's just a fun, loving rivalry, but there's no amount of trash talk that gets spared in those situations. So I would say that some of the best and closest races I've had are against my dad.
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there with that one. And also another thing I always preach is, when you're racing against family or even like really close friends, the person that should have the best shot at beating you is them, as you should have the best shot at beating them as well. Because, if you're around each other, usually you're talking about racing, what you're working on, what you're trying to do better, all these things. Like they should, in a way, you know exactly what their strengths, their weaknesses are. But that's very interesting to hear. As someone who's not as familiar with, NHRA and drag racing, what's like, if someone is trying to get started or get involved, like where's maybe an entry point if someone is wanting to build a team or whatever and start and work their way towards the top ranks? What's the system kind of look like?
Well, I mean, it's very similar to all forms of motorsports. I mean, you can start at the grassroots level. I mean, you can go to your local dirt track and race, a 4-cylinder series. I don't know what they call it, but
Hornets.
Yeah, I mean, so you can go and race that, and just like you can take your. I mean, they have high school divisions in drag racing where there'll be kids out there racing their mom's Ford Explorer.
Gotcha.
It's at the sportsman level. It's based on time. It's a bracket. You put a time on your vehicle and you try to run as close to that time as possible, and that's what keeps it a level playing field across the board for all of the classes, and except for the professional classes, as far as it's not just the guy that spends the most, works the hardest, goes out there and beats you. I mean, when it's a bracket series class, I mean, you're racing, you may have a Ford Explorer racing a Corvette, and they're going to get a head start, and they're going to go down there and try to cut that time down as close as possible so they can. But, it depends on what you want to do and how involved you want to get. But there's member NHRA tracks all over the United States, in addition to the 24 different racetracks that we race at. And you can see all kinds of different cars, classes, teams out there. I have guys that come up to me all the time and want to know how can they work on a top fuel team. And there's a couple of my team members that have went to YOTech or UNOH and learned how to work on a top fuel car and came out there. And to be honest with you, that's probably the best way to get into the sport, is really kind of start at the bottom. I grew up working on race cars and engines and everything with my dad. So that's where I got my ability to work on things and just, mechanical nature. And so knowing the inner workings of a top fuel car, how everything works. And it's very complex, but very primitive in the way that we run things. I mean, it's a 500 cubic inch maximum engine. We run a 491 where it's based on a Hemi. There's 2 spark plugs in every cylinder. There's 2 44 amp magnetos that we run to power that. I mean, it creates enough electricity to weld. There's a 6-disc clutch that has a reverser on it. There's no transmission. It's a direct drive setup where we run 6 10.5-inch discs. So it's, like I said, very complex the way that we apply the clutch and apply the power, but the way that things run, it's just pretty much the same as it's always been. And so people that can work on these things understand them a lot more and ultimately make better crew chiefs, better drivers, and just helping to grow the sport with a knowledgeable fan base. Most of the drivers that are all of the drivers that are at the level we're at right now have started in some form or fashion racing a sportsman car or racing a street car and worked their way up.
That's interesting that you say that, because my favorite part of NHRA, honestly, not only is the racing, but the teardown time afterwards. And especially, I don't know if you guys still do or not, but the throttle wax in the pits when you fire them up. I remember my first time, nose was about running all the fluid out of me. My eyes were just crying. Oh, you can't beat methanol for the very first time, or nitro, I should say, but it was awesome. I got a few more questions here for you. So to give you a little information about myself, I grew up around two things, which I think you can relate to a lot, and that's racing and rodeo, possibly. Pro rodeo, to say. My dad's the president of a PRCA rodeo in Redding, California. And I noticed you got to hang out with some of our buddies, Sage and Alexis Kimsey and Tilden Hooper. Do you know them?
Mm-hmm.
And
I do.
I saw. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I saw that you posted, congrats to Sage on his 7th championship and whatnot. I was just curious, how did you get connected to them? And I have some other questions about your team roping.
So Tilden Hooper is from Carthage, Texas. And we've not really known each other personally very long, but we graduated. I'm a little bit older than Tilden, but he was off rodeo and I was off racing. We knew who each other were. We might run across somebody or some mutual friends or something. And then I really got to know him better through the American Hat Company.
Yep.
And then Sage and Alexis are the same way. And Sage lives here in Salado, Texas, which is a couple hours south of us. And we've been able to meet a lot of those guys like Tuff Cooper and different athletes in the rodeo industry through American Hat. And Sage and Tilden have really just kind of been two that I've gotten along with very well.
Oh yeah.
And stay in contact with now. I actually was talking to Randy Bloomer yesterday, Alexis's dad, and then I text Sage every now and then, or I'll get a text from him. He's at the Fort Worth rodeo right now.
Yeah,
I think he won.
Yep.
He won bracket 7 the other night.
Yeah, he placed in that. I know they always come to Redding to compete in our rodeo third week in May, and it's always great seeing them. We also see them at the NFR National Finals Rodeo. We go there every year. I also noticed on your Instagram you post you team rope. Are you a header or heeler?
Yeah, I do. I would say that I attempt to be a header.
Yeah.
I got I got a little rodeo, or not a rodeo. I got a little roping pin over here at the house, and me and some buddies will team rope or go local,
Jackpots.
Low number roping, jackpot around here, and just have a good time. It's something that I didn't do as a kid, but I've really enjoyed over the last 4 or 5 years. And it goes back to everything. I mean, if you're a competitor, you like to compete at whatever it is.
Oh yeah.
And so I enjoy the Western lifestyle. I raise Brahman cow replacement heifers. I enjoy messing with them. I enjoy going out and roping and I mean, going and roping in the pen and catching and doing that for competition is fun, but there's really nothing more fun than just like a good old fashioned cow catch and having to chase them out across the pasture and catch one, and drag it in the trailer. I mean, that's the most fun to me. That's when you really get to play cowboy.
Oh yeah.
But it's all a good time, man. And you know as well as I do, probably better. You meet some of the best people, and I mean, cowboys are a breed of their own.
1,000%. I'd have to agree with you there. That's why I also had a question. It's funny. A lot of people I don't think realize how expensive horses are. And now that you've gotten into it and you're friends with them, what would you say is more expensive, your race team or the horses that you own?
Well, I'm a bad person to ask that because our race team deal, I mean, at the level we're at, by far, the racing.
Oh, 100%.
But people don't realize that you're not going to go buy you this, like, you can, and you may get lucky, but you're not going to just get the cream of the crop horse here that does what you need it to do, day in and day out on the farm, and take it and win the national finals rodeo with it. I mean,
right.
The horses that Driggers are riding and all those guys, Tough and Trevor and those horses are hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah.
And you're not, people don't understand that. I mean, every horse isn't the same, just like every race car and every driver, everything isn't the same. I mean, and you got to have that horse. And just because just because Trevor Brazile can go win the world on that horse doesn't mean that I can ride it.
Right.
You know, it's a combination of, it's a bond, and you got to fit the horse, and the horse has got to fit you. And I've been very blessed. I have some really good horses that fit me well, and make it a lot more fun. Because when you have that, it helps you to be successful. You know, a good horse will overcome a mediocre roper, just like a good race car will make a decent driver look good.
Right. Well, I think that's going to go ahead and get ready to wrap up the podcast here. You know, if you ever are free the third week in May and you want to come to Reading Rodeo, we're in the top 20 or 30, I think it is, of PRCA rodeos in the nation. So we put on a good show. If you ever want to come and hang out, just hit me up on Instagram. We'll get you out there, get you some good seats. You can probably see Sage, you know, come over here and do good in our rodeo as well. But anyways, thanks for, sparing the time for us today. And I hope to see you possibly again down in Sonoma. If you come out here, I'd like to, go back down there, see you and your dad do well again.
So before we get off here, do you know Leo and Gerald Camarillo?
I do not.
So like Leo Camarillo, like he just passed away. They call him Leo the Lion.
Uh-huh.
Legendary team roper from same town that Eric Medlin was from, the funny car racer. And so I looked those guys up. I'm still good friends with Eric Medlin's mother, Mimi Medlin. I want to say Oakdale, California.
Yeah, Oakdale Rodeo.
And so, I know some of those guys up there, and so I figured you might know the Camarillos, but some of the greatest team ropers there's ever been. So check them out. And guys, thank you so much for the interview. I enjoyed it. Had a good time talking to you, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, I'd like to see you down in Sonoma, and good luck for the rest of your year, and hopefully Chase and 5 becoming legendary, as Sage Kimsey always says.
Become legendary. That's what I like it.
So a phenomenal interview. As I said earlier, major props to Bennett for getting him on the show. He had so much to talk about, and he was actually a really good talker. Just explaining everything from, how he got started in drag racing, what it's like to run a team, advice to other people that may want to get started in drag racing, and then the Western lifestyle that he is also so much a part of.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to learn all that about Steve. He also overcame a huge challenge when he was younger, cancer, and that's huge, honestly. And these races, these race cars, like he described, they just take a toll on you. And to bounce back from that and talk about hitting the wall at 300 some miles an hour is just absolutely insane. I don't think I could really imagine doing that after watching that video. That's just something that's next level. And I know sprint car wrecks are really bad sometimes, and we're like, I can't believe that happened. But NHRA crashes are just next level.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. And hearing him talk about that was insane. And just like you said, his not just his race on track, but his race through life has been such a roller coaster. And so for him to have the strength to overcome what he's overcome is honestly the most impressive part of it all. So in the future, we want to continue to get more guests, that are in different forms of not just, dirt track racing, but any form of, racing each other, because this, was very valuable to hear about a different form of it, and just what these guys do to, pretty much, dedicate their life to what they love. As Bennett said earlier, we have Red Bluff coming back this weekend. So we got 3 weeks of that. Then we got the West Coast Nationals. And then pretty much it's all outdoor racing from there. All the indoor stuff kind of, shuts down. Red Bluff is the last track usually in the country. It seems like that runs all the way into March. And then, or the weather starts to change and sprint cars are about. You'll have some outlaw kart racing outdoors if that's also in your wishes. Dwarf cars, non-wing, modified slate models, the list goes on. So I think this year in the Northwest and the West Coast in general is probably going to be one of the biggest that they've ever seen, with so many marquee events that have been announced and a lot of big schedules for many tracks.
Yep, I am looking forward to the future to get back in my race car, watch you get back in yours, and hopefully we can be at some races together.
Thank you guys for listening to today's show of Off the Track. If you have a guest that you'd like us to get on, a racetrack you'd like us to be at, somewhere to go, let us know in the comments section down below. Bennett, have a great rest of your day. To the viewers, have a great rest of your day, and we will get after it and kill it the rest of the week and be back on track this weekend. See you guys all next Wednesday.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are watching Off the Track, and it is time to drop the hammer.